I'm a naturally lazy person, but in the last 12 months, I'd biked around the world in 31 days, got married, and had become a dad. Not necessarily in that order. So the incentive to get back on the road had, increased. Therefore, goodbye baby and wife, and I set off on a small 4,000-mile journey around the coast of Britain. Every journey takes time to warm up, find its direction. I was in Hastings, which is probably famous for its funicular railway, and of course, the occasional battle. I wasn't much good at history, more interested in the here and now, and I wasn't always good at that. So there were no copper-coloured citadels of high hills in Kent, no thorny savannah on the south coast of England, no often-baked heat haze, no volcanic plugs of mountains, just a mad chap with his gnomes who probably lived with his mum. And always the usual farming machinery ploughing up God's earth before one day it's turned into a housing estate. When I biked around the world, I rode all day and sometimes all through the night. The sound of my bike would purr through my helmet, the easy rumble of the engine penetrating my leathers to vibrate throughout my body, just enough to know that I was motorised. I saw the beauty, I felt the tiredness. On this journey around the coast of Britain, it would be just the same, but slower than I'd ever known before. I've seen 1,000 beaches in 100 countries, but no one bonds with the beach like the British do. Here, whether the sun was out or not, people played without a stitch of self-consciousness as they all poked out through their cozzies. I wasn't yet used to meeting people on this journey. I mean, what do you do with them? Eccentric British people on the edge of this green and pleasant land? On the surface, people are orderly and at peace with themselves, but deep down, completely bonkers.
Broadstairs is so interesting because Dickens was here from time to time. In fact, he mainly lived here. And Bleak House was where he wrote David Copperfield. And he also lived at the Albion Hotel for a while and wrote there. And he said this was his favourite watering place.
Whitstable was equally colourful. Nights I've spent on the beach, too drunk to get home, unconscious under a beach hut, thinking I was having an adventure. As ever, the English are obsessed with their views. The harbour bore more fruit, the oyster bar, cockles and mussels, fishermen tidying up their boats and just hanging around in the sun. It's a short ride from most houses and hops and people with painted faces. H.E. Bates's Darling Buds of May, the romantic vision of the Garden of England. And the mild-mannered countenance of people spinning out the years in the autumn of their lives. And then on to the hustle and bustle of our capital city. What can you say about London? Well, it's got a pigeon problem. Because the city was a port and at the head of the Thames estuary, it just about qualified as being on the coast. I thought I'd see if the Queen was in. She sometimes meets visitors. But there was no royal standard, so no chance of that. Albert Bridge is my favourite river crossing, especially at night. It's a scene in complete contrast to gaudy old Lowestoft up on the Norfolk coast. Suffolk and Norfolk are flat and fertile. And on account of low-lying marshland, most of the time the coast road runs well inland, so I was amidst cabbage plots instead of being by the sea. I suppose it didn't surprise me, but I knew other parts of the world better than my own country. There, crested firebacks and racket-tailed drongos with their sweeping tails stood next to the saffron-coloured orioles. Wagtails flitted and miners stood with the flower peckers, their hoarse coughs sounding as if they were shaking off a cold. Here, it was all new to me. Yet now in the flatlands, you could always get a sense of a big horizon.
So much sky, so much to see. The changing of the seasons. If you live in a city, you will never see a sky like this.
More and more, I was getting the impression of Norfolk being a lonely place.
What's it like living in Cromer? Sort of, yeah. As long as we all stick together, we've got our little clan, our friends.
How does it feel having your eyebrow pierced?
It feels great. It hurts for a couple of seconds and it's over and done with.
Why did you have it done?
Because it's fashion.
I love them. I do like mine. Due to being HMP for quite a long time, I ain't got it back together to get one.
I know my nipple's done next, but never mind.
More people watching the sea, the beaches of Scarborough, more people scoffing, more bulging swimming costumes, shoppers in the town centre, holidaymakers earnestly trying to have a good time. And all the way up the east coast, the landscape would be alternatively punctuated by caravans, chips and fun fairs. Up the way at Whitby, always the yawing of seagulls, this time pitched against the backdrop of the brown sails of a ketch in the harbour. Across the way, the Abbey, the setting for Bram Stoker's Dracula, overlooked what was once a busy whaling port. Sunset and then overnight somewhere by the sea. Dawn the following morning, and the sunrise was spectacular. It's a summer full of blue skies, hedgerows and hollyhocks, and the world looks like it's been blown dry by a fresh breeze. I thought of the people who had biked around the coast before me, Hugh Gibson and Marjorie Cotterill in the 20s, and also Titch Allen, now in his 80s, who did it in the 50s. What had inspired him?
Because it seemed to be the most interesting route, the most challenging route. After all, it was supposed to be a test of a motorcycle and its accessories, and I can think of no better test that could have been done at that time that would appeal to as many people because they would know a little bit of the coast route, and I think would have been interested to find out more about the coast route. I thought it would have great appeal, but it turned out that there was an ACU rule about these things, that you must not average more than 30 miles an hour on the public road. It's an ideal way to get a sort of record in 1954.
I carried on past sea houses, and then with Bamburgh Castle as my backdrop, rode on through Northumberland and over the Scottish border until I reached beautiful Edinburgh. I browsed around the top of the Royal Mile at the foot of yet another imposing castle with amazing views, and mingled with men in tweed hats and women in their scarves. I rattled around the delicately cobbled lanes just off Princess Street. I'd heard there was a man called Alan Forbes who had a shop selling only Indian motorbikes, the only one in the country and one of the few in the world. Such a remarkable obsession had to be worth a visit.
I wouldn't say I've chosen an eccentric occupation. I think the occupation chose me. And I don't really think it's eccentric, because it's just something I want to do, because I don't want to do what everybody else does. The word Indian represents something to most people about freedom, about excitement, about being out in the open air, about exploring, or whatever you want to call it. This is the first Indian that was ever imported into the UK. It's 1908, single, rearwardly inclining cylinder. And as you can see, not every Indian was red. This one was dark blue, quite a common colour for Indians at that time. And the nice thing about this bike to me is, apart from the fact that it was the first one ever imported into this country, is that the man who imported it rode it all the way from London to Edinburgh all those years ago.
Behind the scenes in Alan's workshop, parts from a machine that were impossible to find. It was like a movie set from some bygone age. Alan's mechanic refused to be filmed for fear the camera would take away his soul. Such are the irresistible characters of the world of bikers.
This 1340cc 1953 Indian Chief is archetypical of American motorcycles, and it represents a golden age for motorcycling in America. It's also one of the last of the Iron Redskins.
Across the city in Leith, the nature of the journey changes, moves on to the biker of today. Ladies and gentlemen, Gordon Brunton and his gorgeous Harley girls.
Guy goes to the doctor to get a mole removed from the end of his penis, and the doctor says, all right, but next time I'm reporting it to RSPCA.
Is there anything I can do for you?
It's a magnificent obsession. The commitment to it has excluded so many other things that other people value. The bike makes one almost like a bird.
It was time to leave the noble city, cross the Firth of Forth while the summer sun was still shining. As ever, I was back on the road, on a journey where the seasons now began to merge. The shortened shadows at last began to stretch, and the nights began to crisp. If it was Tuesday afternoon, it must have been Aberdeen, Granite City, city of grey stone, and lighted ships in the harbour. Now and then I saw reminders of how, in the past, men worked, often just to survive. Living on the coast with the big horizon, you're constantly reminded of the day's cycle. I arrived in Penang in the evening light. That night, looking through the pub window, it occurred to me of how often my life has been spent looking in on the lives of others. Next morning, it was a surprise to see where I'd camped. I had a right old headache. Strange stuff, beer. Where I was here was the opposite to the big city. But it isn't just the big cities that change. As traditional forms of work die, so local communities have also to adapt.
This is the famous phone box as featured in Local Hero. It's used by, we get lots of famous people in the village and they always have a look at it. We had Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits was here just very recently. We've had Sean Connery, we've had Billy Connolly. There's various other newsreaders from television. Whenever there's any appearances in Aberdeen at Her Majesty's Theatre, the big shows that come there, we normally see the stars up here and they all come down, have their lunch and usually come out and phone home from the box.
I wasn't so interested in fancy people that called home from this or that telephone box, for I was twixt the wind and the washing, always the washing pointing the way to the waves. Living on the bike, becoming part of the bike and her congress of tappets and pistons, I always felt free. I rode it like a jockey rides his horse, and for me there was an illusion to the horse that will always be there, for I am the machine ticking aphid on its back. Macduff Harbour on the shoulder of Scotland. It was hard to meet people when you're on the move, in and out of cafes all the time, but it was always like this on the road, because for days you don't really converse. You just observe glimpses of lives and hear snatches of people talking.
The fishermen used to go out catching haddocks, and they dried these haddocks on the beach here. It used to be a lovely white beach, and they dried the haddocks there, and they sold these dry fish.
I think the statistics prove that it has a very high record for sunshine. And unfortunately, we're a wee bit off the beaten track, you see, because we're off A96. Yes. And people just don't know about this little corner.
I was slowly making my way to Elgin, where I'd planned a rather special interview. But first I stopped to look at the glistening sea and paddle in the cooling water. I felt like the boy of my youth, which had never left me. It's like the biker that never leaves the man.
I think Sparky likes this very much indeed. He loves the fresh air. He likes the wind through his whiskers and his hair, and he gets a lot of fun out of it, I think. Flies. He never complains. He's so good in the back of the bike. Banks over at the corners, right or left, and he's just lovely. Yes.
I was now high up on the coast of eastern Scotland, further away from family and home, and at day's end, when the shadows are lengthening, I know it's the time when I must look for somewhere to spend the night. I'm near John Groats, yeah.
Well, when are you coming home?
Soon.
Have you forgotten that we got married 3 weeks ago, Nicky?
No, I know you're my wife, darling.
And it was you who got me pregnant and gave me a baby, you know. And I'm stuck with him.
Oh, crikey. I'd forgotten about the wife. Right then, time to get back on the road. It's always like this when I'm travelling, whether it's 10 miles up the way or on the other side of the world. I end up in a small world of my own, completely oblivious to my former life. It's almost a necessary form of survival to concentrate 100% on the task in hand. For me, this is my work. Being on the road is my office. Like anyone else, I've got a business to run, believe it or not. And anything less than this, and I risk ignominy and oblivion, poverty. And worst of all, no worms for the boy.
It's 57 miles to Groats, 37 to Wick, and it's 43 miles to Thurso.
With a twitch of the eye, Mr. Spooky pointed the way, and soon I was on the long run in to John Groats. I rode into the car park. Where was everybody? Perhaps they're all admiring the view, or on the beach playing with their silly beach balls, frolicking in the surf. I was eager to see who else had made it this famous shrine of adventurers the world over. It didn't look very inspiring, and typically, interesting adventures are not that interesting when they happen, but become more so in the telling.
Well, this is John Groats, and there's not much to say because there's not much here. It's quite tedious, really. So that's that. This is where all the nutters go, from Land's End to John Groats. But at the moment, there aren't any nutters here because it's winter. So that's that. There's no one to talk to.
It was, to say the least, dull. So I put 20p in the telescope and made it up as I went along. That was the best 20p I'd ever spent. It's not that I'm totally preoccupied to rooting out eccentric characters, but halfway through the trip and not finding a nutter in John Groats was something of a letdown. For goodness sake, surely there was one around here somewhere. So, I headed west.
I can't see any here either. No one-legged pogo people, no Indian fakers rolling from Land's End to John Groats. No, nothing. Not a sausage.
Which reminded me, breakfast. So I checked into a B&B and scrambled me chops around the proverbial British start to the day. I left at sunrise. Dear Willow, just a short note to say that contrary to what your mother says, you do have a father. It's just that when I married your mummy, I forgot to tell her that I'd be away quite often. One day, you will be sitting here by your bike, thinking of me as I am now thinking of you. Lots of love. Dad. You know me, I can talk to anyone. But in these parts, it's a bit of a challenge. So how long have you lived here?
All my life.
And what do you do?
Farmer.
How many sheep have you got?
Maybe, say, less than 1,000. Just under 1,000.
Do you enjoy it?
Yes, I enjoy it very much.
Why?
Because I like working with animals. I like what I'm doing, you know. I just like it. I like peace and quiet, that's it.
This isn't a film set, it's actually real. I'd also observed that in this land of simple lives, there lives that type of magic which combines so magnificently with isolation that you need to go there to understand.
There's a gale coming with about 60-mile-an-hour wind, so I'm trying to get further south to avoid it. But Scotland is like so beautiful. Just when you think you've found the most beautiful spot, then there again, there's something actually even more beautiful.
This was my idea of a panoramic view. Okay, so the views all around were grand, to be sure. They made you think. But what people want about adventure is the heroic. But I think more than the bravery of things, it's the cleverness of knowing when to do nothing. So far north, the early morning sun bleeds the sky of an acid blue, and the grey slate heavens shift in. But more than this, in these parts, you also slide spirally in time, so different is life. The quietness to think, and here, when you have the chance, you notice that in a queue of colours, the reds and the yellows line up, waiting for the browns. Always the camera will be slung around my neck, preparing yet again to download personal experiences into people's living rooms. How gloriously indulgent. So there I was on this red bike that breathes like a stallion, with its pistons and mechanics, its valves opening and closing, tight with a slap and the total rhythm of an engine in perfection. And yet, I cannot deny that sometimes in the brooding light, I would rather set sail in the blue sky than roar like a lion across the plain. I followed the grey winding road on my way to the Pass of the Cattle, which is the highest route for motor vehicles in the country. Overnight, I would stay in a small village blown clean by the Atlantic wind. This was my landlady in Applecross. Isn't she lovely?
I was born and bred in Applecross. It's great to be part of a small community. Applecross is famous for at least a couple of things. The Applecross Inn food, it's seafood, and the beautiful view of the Coolin Ridge.
Yeah, nice view. I could see her knickers on the line.
The reason I like living in Applecross is the close-knit community, the neighbourly thing. I'm going to get it wrong now. The reason I like living in Applecross is the close-knit community, the neighbourly thing. Everybody knows everyone else, but the downside is they all know what you're going to do before you do yourself.
Time for me to leave then, and head out over the Pass of the Cattle.
I find that I slowly degenerate in mood if I don't get out on the bike. And so the motorcycling for me is an essential part of my being. It's terrific. When I get back on the bike, if I've been off for a wee while, haven't been out for a wee while, and I get back on it, within minutes, the jump in mood is just fantastic. I don't know, I don't take drugs, so I don't know what it would be like, but it's nearly as good as whiskey. It's better than anything else and lasts longer than sex.
Goodbye, Scotland. Blackpool, it was great.
The Jock Road Cafe has been here since 1950. Used to be called Coker Rooms years ago, but then it was Canteens, and now it's Frank's Cafe. But it was also already known as Frank's Cafe. It was never known as anything else. There's plenty of characters been in the shop. Lots of footballers, belong to Everton and Liverpool. Also Jeffrey Archer, the author. He's been here 10 times. I can't get rid of the man, he won't go away. Not that I want him to go away, he's good for business at times. But there's been a lot of people in Liverpool, and they're all characters, boxers,
footballers, dancers, instruments. They can all play musical instruments. They've all been good. And I've just enjoyed what I do.
Scouse. There's no other accent like it in the world. I'd made it to Liverpool. And on the outskirts of the city on the dock road, I'd breakfasted at Frank's. So with a full belly, I got back on my bike again. The famous Liver building came into view. There's a port. Liverpool is a city of leaving. Millions have departed in search for new life. Adventurers in their own right, every man, woman and child. I could really relate to that. But what's left of all that energy and achievement now? Down by the docks is a collection of lone-looking buildings, an empty quaysides. Life has become a museum. This was the second time I've been on a ferry on my bike. The first time was across the Cook Strait between South and North New Zealand. It was a time then, as it is now, a place for quietness, away from the sound of the road. It was odd, but so often I was alone, but never felt lonely. But away from this precious machine, I felt lost. It was almost as if I did not exist, that icons of the solo motorbike are established when you think of the horse and the rider, allusions to the steed, the steaming transport, the beast between your legs, the sweat and the hot oil triggering attention to check the dials, how is she breathing, and how does she skip and pulse. My last call of the day was to meet my friend Dave, boss of Davida, reputedly the best classic-made motorbike helmets in the world. There weren't any nutters in John Groats, but I'm sure he'll forgive me for saying that there was a lovely one here. Dave started from scratch, made his own moulds, designed his own advertising campaigns, sold them around the world, and then did it again and again, but only better and with more originality than anyone else. I was given the royal tour and went down to the paint shop and had a chat with Paul.
Some of the most unusual helmets that I've painted are Evel Knievel helmets, Stars and Stripes, Union Jacks, silver flames with a black outline, also yellow and red flames, but they're mainly the ones which I do are the flames. I usually paint between 50 and 60 a day, depending on the actual colour range that I'll do or what they're going to be used for.
As Henry Ford said about his cars, you can have any colour as long as it's black. Not so here. In the heart of Victorian Wales, there were the old and the young, all taking their airs. For me, the quaint gentility of Llandudno exemplified the perfect British seaside resort. Not too tacky, nor too self-conscious, just right. And yes, I'd found a nutter.
Lovely day for it, flat calm, sea state, nice sunny morning. If you'd like to join us, you just go down the jetty and pay on board. A few minutes to sailing time if you'd like to come along. Halfway around the Great Job, 4 mile round trip.
Within me, there was always a wild and deep-seated rage. Sometimes it still pulsed to remind me how I might be imprisoned by a toneless life that would force me to become frustrated. The bike prevented that. Mythology remembers the innocence of the first state, the perfect virtue of the Taoists, you know, Adam in the garden. Because it's a characteristic of men in the Golden Age always to be migratory. So travellers become gatherers of information. This has always been. Marco Polo was an emissary for the Kublai Khan, and Columbus for the King of Spain, shoring up fragmenting kingdoms or bolstering wealth. So strong is a migratory impulse that a mother will abandon her fledglings rather than miss her opportunity for a long journey south. A guy called Kierkegaard once said he knew of no thought so burdensome that it cannot be walked away from. The funny thing about Wales is that it's full of castles. There are lots of them, and they're very beautiful. As far as I know, the road tunnels of North Wales are the only ones along the coast road. They reminded me of being in the south of France, and in a flash of orange light, I was back on my world record attempt. The light strobed across the face of my helmet. Daylight brought me back to North Wales. I was approaching the castle, and soon, cornering by the ramparts, I'm pleased to say that there are lots of loonies on the road. One a day, it is said, will keep the doctor away. And here I'd found a particularly good one.
I'm Father Demetrius. I am attached to the Eastern Orthodox Church, and I have a retreat house at Carwell. I was trained by the late Archimandrite Barnabas, the great Welsh wizard, really. My mother used to call him the Welsh wizard. I went over to Tudor Estates, and in the window was the most extraordinary advertisement. Welsh chapel for sale, Carmel, only to be considered by a bankrupt Welsh builder or a man-to-man on the run from England. Oh, I thought this is just the sort of man I could do business with him.
Well, the dear man wasn't going to do business with me. Suddenly, it was time to leave Carnarvon, and one big in-your-face castle that was designed to let you know who was boss in these parts. So from man-made magnificence to natural grandeur, and into Snowdonia. On the edge of the heart of Snowdonia, I managed to rest and think. I was due to meet Eric Jones in Tremadog, a born-again biker, who is also one of the great adventurers of our time. He's ballooned over the summit of Everest, and in his early 60s, base jumped 3,200 feet off Angel Falls. But I felt his most impressive journey was in 1983, when he became the first British mountaineer to solo the 5,000-foot north face of the Eiger.
Well, as a young lad, I was always mad on motorbikes, and as soon as I got enough money, I got myself a Triumph Tiger 100, and then after that I got a Triumph Tiger 110. Then I did my national service, spent 2 years there, came out there with no money, bought an old BSA 810, and then I got out of the motorcycling era and got into climbing, and so it was more practical really to have a little van. But through the years I'd always been a motorbike fan and always yearned to have one, and since I've been running the cafe here, you know, if any of my motorbiking friends came along, I always tried to get a lift or try to have a ride on their motorbikes.
Eric seemed remarkably modest. He spoke to me about a couple of his adventures. As an adventurer myself, I was frankly in awe.
All through the climb, I was so aware that I might get hit by a falling rock or a piece of ice and everything, and so the tension was just incredible, and you know, the relief of tension was just amazing. I mean, it was a little bit of an anticlimax in a way, but you know, because I dreamt about this climb for so long. But I actually broke down in tears on the summit, you know, with just the release of tension, really, that I'd finally made it. There was one point on the north face of the Eiger in the ramp, about halfway up on the second day. It's called the Ice Bulge, and it's an overhang of ice. And normally when there's lots of ice in it, you know, the climbing is fairly reasonable. But when I got to it, there was no ice at all in it, and it was just like smooth, polished rock. It was just like marble. I couldn't see how to climb it. And I thought, well, what can I do? I dreamt for so long for this climb. The disappointment of having got halfway up and having to turn back, and then suddenly I felt as if I was going onto another plane, and I just managed to climb this overhang until today, really. I couldn't tell you how I climbed it, but I almost felt that I was almost floating up it. It was a strange feeling. When we took off from the Gokyo Valley on our Everest flight, you know, the view as we rose out of the valley was just stupendous, and I was taking panoramas. And as we rose higher and higher, we could see more and more of the Himalayas. And we had problems. All our burners went out before we reached the mountain, and at one point we were descending very rapidly towards the southwest of Everest, so there was lots of danger at that point. But eventually we managed to fly over the summit, and when we reached the Tibetan side, we actually reached a height of 38,000 feet in an open basket. And to look back, you know, on Everest was just amazing. You know, I'd been on the South Col in 1978, and I could see exactly the high point I'd reached. And you know, it's a moment that you know, really stands out in my mind. Something that I'll never forget, really.
There is never enough time to do what you want to do. Soon I'd rounded the Pembrokeshire Peninsula, zapped along South Wales, scooted through Cardiff. And then I continued along the Devon coast, stopping at Clovelly. It felt weird being off the bike. Walking just didn't seem right at all. I guessed I'd get used to it, and I felt reminded why God had given me legs. Clovelly is a small hamlet, wholly owned by the National Trust. And when tourists aren't visiting it, it seems like a time-locked land. No cars are allowed in the village or the main street. And even the postman has his own way of delivering letters. And this probably hasn't changed since the postal service began. Further on, I stopped in the village of Boscastle. Autumn had come and gone. The winter weather was rushing in from the west to stir a cold grey sea. I'd nothing to say that the sea couldn't say for herself, so I just sat and watched. The best time to travel around the coast of Britain is when no one else is there. It saved me the pleasure of overtaking 1,000 caravans and left the way free for me to be on the road and at last onto Land's End. Despite the tourism, places like this never change. They have qualities that are timeless, and quite simply, they're beyond the influence of man.
The amount of time it's taken me to get around the coast of Britain, I could have gone around the world 4 times. And the distance around the coast of Britain, if you unravel it and put it in a straight line, you could almost get to central Mongolia. So having done, well, the south coast and all the way up to Kent and the Medway Valley and Essex and the Norfolk coast, all the way up the east coast to Scotland, all the way around Scotland, down the highlands, down the Cumbrian coast, then on through northwest England, North Wales, whole of Wales, and now here we are in the West Country, and all I've got to do now is a little bit from here to Brighton, and then I can call it a day, and then the journey around the coast of Britain. Really completed. Still not seen any nutters, no Indian fakers here either. Oh, nothing at all, no sausages, no rashers of bacon, nothing, not a single sign of a nutter anywhere.
From windswept Land's End, I left Cornwall and headed east. I'd arranged to meet another friend, one with a rather special eye for the motorbike. Down the steep-sided twisting lanes of Devon. Roy Barrett is now acknowledged as the doyen of motorcycle painters, and I found him in his cottage by the coast, where he combines his passion with his considerable talent. Here was a man who had changed his life. He once worked for the BBC, and now he had given all that away in exchange for a way of life that I found was completely different. A lot of people think about things like this, but it amazes me how few people get round to doing it. Why is it that people go through life never doing what they really, really want to do?
When I was about 5 or 6, my grandmother lived right opposite the Velocette factory, and I used to spend my Saturday mornings sitting on the gate, right opposite their gate, watching these guys pushing brand new Velocettes out of the gates and loading them onto the lorries. I never was the same again. Motorcycles are quite a challenge to paint. A car is relatively easy, but motorcycles, of course, they've got so many bits showing, all the technical bits, the engines, frames, all those sort of things. And a lot of people say that watercolour painting is quite a tricky medium, and I've chosen to use a tricky medium to paint a very difficult subject. So it is a real challenge sometimes to get those bikes onto paper. So there's something very nostalgic for me about the aesthetics of the bikes, the proportions, the actual appearance of the motorcycles have very definitely a period quality which attracts me as an artist. And that nostalgic appearance also leads me into nostalgic settings, the places the bikes would have been seen in the 60s and 70s. Places like the coffee bars that I and my mates used to go and meet at. And the fairgrounds was another great meeting place when we were rockers back in the 60s.
As the carousel goes around, so do people, and I met up with Robbie Marshall. His world adventure was different to mine. I took 31 days and he took 2 years.
It's the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. It's also the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. One starts off on such a journey with assumptions that the difficulties are going to be things like mechanical problems with the bike, terrorists, rough roads. Sure, that became a problem, but the biggest problems were was the red tape between countries. Physically getting yourself over a border, bribing the right people, finding out whether you're allowed to, not getting arrested, ducking when people try and shoot at you. I was doing 15, 20 miles an hour. There was a big shrubby sort of hedge alongside me. Next thing I knew, 2 shots rang out. The first bullet pierced the windshield here and must have flown just over my left arm, I suppose. I then had the sensation of being kicked in the back of the head rather hard. And as you can see here, the bullet just bounced straight off the back of my crush helmet.
I asked him what it was like to be back.
Once you get used to people being tall and white and, I was going to say fat again, but just well-fed, not really. One does drop into your birthright very, very quickly, and if you spent most of your life in a particular country, I suppose it seems like home. I am surprised at how dull it seems. I wanted the adventure to keep happening, and it doesn't. You know, I wake up in the morning in the bed I woke up in yesterday. That is a novel experience. But
it does lack the excitement, and it's that excitement that makes a trip like I've just finished seem worthwhile.
For me too, I knew exactly what you meant. The journey was at an end, but there was just one more nutter to go.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for red, gold, and the coins to get richer and richer.